Welcome to Abroad, and welcome to the Life of Leadership. I'm Rob Wolcott. Kristi Ross is one of Chicago's great entrepreneurs. Kristi has also devoted significant time and attention to leveraging the Tastytrade platform and audience to share the stories of other entrepreneurs. Kristi, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Super excited to be here.
It's great. Well, it looks like one of your mottos. It sounds familiar to me. Just do it. It looks like you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Great. So before we get into the deeper stuff, the Kristi Ross story stuff, tell us a little bit about Tastytrade, just for anyone who doesn't have a context for what this business does.
Absolutely. And thank you for that opportunity. So Tastytrade is an online financial network that empowers self-directed investors to take control of their finances. Really, we have a mission to make finance fun and actionable. And we truly have built an ecosystem of 7 companies within our company to empower the self-directed investors. So this is all about teaching and applying what someone has learned, and we help them maneuver the markets, whether it's going up, down, or sideways.
Well, that's great. And speaking of investments, I suspect you and your co-investors have been pretty happy with Tastytrade's performance. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So now I want to set the clock back, not back too much, but maybe to your childhood. So we all have those formative experiences and moments that maybe we don't quite understand their import at the time. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But share a story for us of an experience, something that happened to you as a child that you think affects your style and capability as a leader.
Sure. I'll start out, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin where brats and cheese curds are staple items. Outdoors and experiences were really the focus, and family, mattered, and family matters everywhere. But I had wonderful parents that had an amazing work ethic. My dad worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. And then on the side, he started a couple companies over time that didn't exactly make it, but he pursued them with all of his energy. And I was lucky enough to witness a man with endless optimism. And I learned it was okay to fail, and it was okay to have big dreams, but you should do something about it, not just talk about it. And he'd get up early for his first job. I remember getting up super early so I could see him before he went off to work. And in the early morning hours before the sun came up, he'd sit at the kitchen table while he had his coffee. And on these little pieces of paper, we'd draw up plans for a business. One I remember was literally a hot dog stand. The outdoor seating looked like a hot dog with the bun for a bench and the hot dog for the table, and a hamburger where you were sitting inside the hamburger, and the umbrella over top was the top of the bun and the lettuce.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but how old were you when you were having these business planning competitions with your dad?
I was in elementary school, so I was under 10. They were creative conversations is really, I think, how I'd frame it.
That's fantastic. Well, it causes me to think about the Arrested Development, the Bluth family and the banana stand. I don't know if you've seen that. But, so how do you think that affected you in your career in life?
Yeah. So, as I grew older, and my parents were, they got divorced. And so I didn't spend as much time with them. But I think it's sort of the second piece of this that really sort of opened that up. That set the foundation, were those early morning meetings, I'll call them. But when we were together, when I was a little bit older, we'd debate topics on race, religion, and truly touchy subjects. But the thing is he welcomed my opinion. He made me feel like I had a voice worth listening to. And what he did, without me knowing at the time, was he created a safe space for me to test opinions or theories, even though it didn't match his, maybe. But it was that diversity of thought and respect for others' opinions that was so incredibly powerful for me today as a leader, above all. And I think, understanding that as a leader, listening is key to developing people around you, allowing them to talk through to solve their own problems, equal to, of course, providing guidance where you can, but just doing it in this sort of different way. So allowing me to figure out things and talk through them without judgment was like truly foundational for me. And I have to say something about my mother too, because she was the most graceful, loving, supportive person I ever knew. And unfortunately, she was taken too early due to cancer when I was a teenager. But my biggest takeaway from her was just to be nice. And now that applied to all areas and stages of life. I'm grateful for that phrase, just be nice. Basic manners go a long way. And even sharing a smile or using someone's name or like sort of the please and thank yous. That effect, like that, you can have an incredible effect basically on anyone around you, people around you, with something so small, and it doesn't cost you anything. And so it applies personally and professionally, and is so powerful as a leader. It's a simple yet powerful life lesson for me.
Well, and I would say both the listening and the niceness are essential ingredients to combating this decline in trust that's going on across our society, not just in political institutions, but corporations, within organizations, et cetera. I think we can all learn from your mom and your dad. So let's fast forward a little bit. Who was a significant mentor in your life, and what's one thing you learned from her or him?
Oh, I've had so many teachers and mentors throughout my life that really sort of instilled thoughts or lessons that became, I'm going to say, building blocks, which eventually form like who we are today, right? Let me do this. I'll share two stories. I'll try to make them quick, but I had this wonderful volleyball coach that and volleyball was my sport. I loved it. I was super competitive, and she liked me and she encouraged me, and I put all I had into everything I did on the court. But she also happened to be my track coach. So a small town in Wisconsin, teachers and coaches like sort of had to wear multiple hats. But anyway, I was a okay runner. I was good, as a sprinter, but a terrible long distance runner. And so one day a teammate was out sick, and she came to me to fill in to run the 440, which is a quarter mile. And I normally ran the 220, which is like clearly a sprint the whole way. So I said, sure, yeah, I'll do it, thinking how hard can it be? And I ran it and actually won that heat. And I was even like surprised with myself, but I hated it. I hated that race. I sprinted the whole way and literally like was going to throw up at the end. Still trying to catch my breath, and bent over. My coach comes over to me. She comes running over, puts her hand on my back while I'm still bent over, and says, "Great job! You can own this race, and I need you to run the anchor for the mile relay, because the girl was out who normally ran it, and so that's running the last leg, the last 440." And I literally could barely get the words out. I'm like, I can't do it. Because I still was trying to catch my breath and was still convinced I was going to die or throw up. And she said, "Yes, you can. You just did. It's 90% mental and 10% physical, and you'll be fine in a couple minutes." And I kept saying, I can't. She looked at me and walked away. And sure enough, I was fine in a couple of minutes. I survived. I ran back up to her and said, I'll do it. And she looked at me and said, "Sorry, got someone else, missed opportunity." And she walked away. And I was devastated. And it was sort of that missed opportunity. Just hearing that, like I was crushed to have it come out of her mouth. So, okay, quick fast forward to my first job out of college. It was public accounting, and we had maybe a dozen people in our starting class. And they ushered in like various partners of the firm to give these inspirational speeches, like in their area of expertise, like tax law or,
the classic inspirational speech about tax law. I mean, everyone's heard that, right?
It was about finding your passion and really, understanding and diving deep. Financial services, whatever their thing was. Most people aren't really passionate about tax law, but there are some. So one partner who happened to be the team that I started on gave a talk about networking. And so it was quite foundational for me because he explained that you should always have like your antennas up, right? That opportunity is everywhere. And keep in mind, he would say, that anyone you meet could be a client. Your friends can be your clients, your clients can be your friends. You could find opportunities sitting next to you on a plane or standing in line at a store. And that was actually a really powerful message for me. The bigger point was opportunities all around you. Pay attention. Now it was the combination of those two mentors, my track coach and my first real boss, if you will, that formed one of my own life's mottos, which is opportunities all around you, pay attention, but you have to grab it. You have to take action. And you have to do something with it when it's in front of you. You have the power to shape your future. And I think that's what my biggest takeaway was from these early mentors in my career.
Well, absolutely. In the World Innovation Network, we say never leave serendipity to chance. And part of that is after you suspect you might have just been presented with a happy accident, it's up to you to decide if you're going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And by the way, just as an aside, one of my mentors at Northwestern from undergrad on was my accounting professor, Alan Drebin. And a professor at Kellogg for many years, loved the research, loved the field, and genuinely loved it and loved his students. And at his retirement brunch, he stood up at the podium in his light blue short sleeve button down shirt and khaki pants. And he stood at the podium and he said, "Yes, it's true. For 45 years, I've lived the dream. I've been an accountant." And everyone started laughing because they knew that he was serious. So,
I love that. I just want to give him a hug.
You would. I mean, he's still alive. It might cause him a heart palpitation if you tried at this point, but we'll edit that out. So, great. So let's shift now to a big question. And feel free to not have a specific answer, or maybe you have a very specific answer. And that is, what do you see, or how do you describe your purpose in life?
Yeah, this is something that I would say is that it's a difficult question, right? Because I feel like it's something that we always are searching for. I think, finding your purpose in life is sort of a never-ending quest. So I feel fortunate in the sense that a lot of people have played a part in molding me throughout my life and empowering me along the way. So I feel that my purpose is to empower others around me, and find ways to touch or enhance or broaden their way of thinking in the hopes that they realize they have way more power than they think they do in paving their life's path and experiences, like personally and professionally. But I believe that we can create our own luck, kind of like you were just talking about, but putting ourselves in unique and challenging positions. We just have to sort of remove the fear. So in everyday life, I know that most people want to have a job or career that has purpose, that, they want to work for a company that has a mission, a true mission that speaks to them. And everybody wants to make a difference in the world, right? So everybody wants to feel like they can have an impact, or that they can contribute to something bigger than themselves every day. And when I think about Tastytrade, for example, we built Tastytrade sort of on that premise, empowering our customers to control their finances, empowering our employees to have a voice, to make decisions, to try new things, to constantly be open to new challenges and learning. I've sort of worked to champion that mindset all around with all of our employees. And if I do my job right, they feel like they've contributed. They feel like they've made a difference and they want to come to work, right? But then I also have at home too, where I have three wonderful, mindful, thoughtful, strong girls who, if I do my job right as a parent, I hope that they feel empowered to create their own path and be sure to, touch people in a positive manner along the way. But isn't the purpose in all of our lives in some way to help leave positive imprints on other people's lives, like around us? Unless you're Bill Gates, who's eradicating polio or solving the world's water crisis or climate change, and that's powerful. That's leaving an imprint not only on other people's lives, but also on future generations. We're not all, Bill Gates, right? But I think it is important to recognize that everyday interactions with people can also have a profound impact because each interaction can have this ripple effect. So little actions can actually have that profound impact too. I think about a pond, right? You have a stone that drops in a pond and you have this wonderful ripple effect.
So, Kristi, we all have these eye-opening moments in our lives. Some of them happen slowly over time and lead to a crescendo. Some happen in an instant. Tell us about an epiphany that you've had and how it affected your career path.
Where do I start? There are so many. I'll start with a small one, but it's had a mighty impact on me. I was running point on a deal early in my career, working with another guy on the other side who was a little older than me. And I remember asking him a question so we could figure out this problem we were working on. And he gave me an answer with such confidence and conviction that I took it back and I dug deeper. And as I dug deeper, his answer didn't really make any sense to me. But he was so confident, I thought for sure I must be wrong. And finally, I wasted too much time, and I'll share with you very openly. My pet peeve is wasting time, one of my biggest pet peeves. And so I decided to show him, what I was coming up with, and he said very casually, "Oh yeah, that's right." And I was mad. I was actually mad because, first of all, I wasted all that time, but more so because I gave his confidence more weight than I did my own experience. And so I think I truly learned at that moment, or it really solidified for me at that moment, that confidence does not equal competence, but rather that confidence equals perceived competence. And so the bottom line of confidence and perception matters. It was one of those things that taught me to not assume someone knows more than me. I think that was one thing that was really important in my career that really just sort of made me look at the world differently. And then there's one thing that I think is worth sharing is anytime I have had to go through a difficult decision in my life, I pull out, one of those old trusty legal pads, the yellow pads, get a pen, draw a line right down the middle.
Does it have to be an oversized legal size pad?
Oversized legal.
Yeah. Okay,
there's
all right.
a lot of pros and cons.
That means it's far more important.
Order those on Amazon now.
Right.
All right. So, but I put the pros and cons, on each side, and I would weight each one of those. I'd give each point, each of them a certain number of points. What it did is it forced me to bring my feelings about each point to the surface and really quantify it. And so as long as you're honest, with yourself, it works. And one of those decisions was when we started to have kids, and they, of course, my kids are so important to me. I have three lovely girls, as I had mentioned, but I struggled with how can I continue to have a career and raise a wonderful family with my husband. And my legal pad exercised, helped me figure that out. I ended up quitting a job I absolutely loved, and I loved the people, but the travel I did not love. And that was what was making it hard for me. And I figured it out, that if I give up the travel and commit to creating some sort of normalcy or consistency in my life, because I work way too many hours, but that's sort of my MO. But hopefully I'd find a middle ground there, and ultimately, more happiness. And so while I believe I was in tune enough to make mindful decisions about my path in order to make sure that I truly experienced the effects of this change, I still needed to take action in some way. I still needed to create that special time with my family now that I didn't have to travel. And so I did. I created that meaningful time. I left the company I loved. I'd better make this change impactful. So I created what I called my morning connection, my morning tradition with my family. I'm an early morning person in general. I'm a big breakfast person. And I look at it sort of symbolically, like starting each and every day out right, a hot breakfast, a healthy breakfast for my kids, my family, like fueling the body and at the same time, like nurturing the soul. And I talk with them before school, while I made their breakfast and lunches, and hopefully helping them feel loved and supported before they went off into the world every morning. But that also made me feel better about going off to work. So that epiphany for me was more about forcing mindfulness into those difficult life decisions of literally writing it down and weighing the things that were important to me. My children, my husband, my family, and also my career, plus taking that next step in creating symbolic traditions and opportunities for impactful moments, as a parent and as a leader. I think we all want that. So
great. Well, Kristi, I have a challenging follow-up question. You're a morning person. What about your husband and daughters? Are they morning people?
That is a good question. In the early years, my husband was not a morning person. He was a night person. And I think he shifted a little. God bless him. But also what's funny is I have two night owls and one morning bird in terms of my girls. So right. We got the whole gamut here.
Right. Well, as always happens in families. So what about the unexpected in your life? What about a chance event, a moment where something turned that, as you look back, you see was meaningful for your personal or professional development? Tell us about one of those.
Yeah. Again, I feel like there's so many, but I guess the easiest one for me to point out is in relation to, one of my life's mottos, that opportunities all around you. So a client, and this is again my first job out of college, and I was in public accounting. A client I worked on needed a CFO, and I was 25, and I raised my hand. I'm like, I'll do it. to my surprise, I got the interview. So as soon as I got that interview, I'm like I really want this. I want to do this. So I ran out and bought some books. Amazon didn't exist at the time, so I actually had to go to the physical bookstore. And I got a book that it's a desktop CFO. And then at the same time, I bought the next book, which is the desktop CEO, because I figured if I'm reporting to the CEO, I need to know what they need to know. Right. And so I prepared for the interview, and I got the job. And so I don't think I got the job because I was like this super fabulous, confident, best CFO ever. But I did have confidence that I could figure it out. If I put the time and effort into it, I knew my work ethic would carry me through that. So the lesson was, that opportunity, is all around you, but you got to grab it and you got to do something with it. And so then I got the the extra opportunity to potentially get the job. But what I did is I worked really hard to prepare for it, to make it happen. So taking that risk helped me pave the way, to make sort of the next leap in my career. Had I not taken that chance, I might not have gotten the next CFO opportunity, for example. But taking risks is important. You need to sort of remove that fear and ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Kristi, you've been part of a team that has already created two extraordinarily successful companies, but nothing is a straight line, as we know. So give us an example of an unexpected event, occurrence, a speed bump, a catastrophe, perhaps, something that happened in the midst of building one of these companies. And how did you recover? What can we learn from it?
Yeah, I think, so I guess I would talk about Tastytrade. So we started Tastytrade over 10 years ago. And my co-CEO, Tom Sosnoff, had the original idea for the company. But while the company was meant to make finance, fun and actionable, and that's still the mission today, it's also about empowering, the self-directed investor to take control of their finances and their investments. But it's also, it's about empowering individuals through content technology, and I'm even going to say personal interactions. So helping people maneuver the financial markets together, and it's this wonderful ecosystem. But I would say that when we first started, we started a little too heavy on the fun. And we created shows that were we created shows that were we hired a number of Second City comedians, and those Second City comedians, we figured we could teach them finance, but it's really hard to teach someone to be funny or, to be comedic in a certain way. And so we started out, and we produced these shows from the beginning. And I really hope, Rob, that those original archives are buried deep somewhere, deep in the archives, that nobody ever sees them. But what we did is we made ourselves accessible to our customers, and we got feedback. And what we found was that our customers really wanted more finance with just a flair of fun. And we really had to sort of shift the content we were producing and the way we were producing it. If we didn't listen to our customers, we would have failed. We wouldn't have made it to where we are today. And so I think that there's a couple lessons in there. One, being, create a product and get it out there as fast as you can so that you can get feedback, so that you can actually, tweak it, but don't do it in a vacuum. And that's probably something you've heard a million times over, right? But I think too is creating access, making sure that you're accessible to your customers and accessible to get that feedback so that it's a two-way conversation is really, really powerful. And so when I look at that, I would say that is something that, if we didn't do that, if we didn't listen to the customers, if we didn't get the product out there for feedback, if we didn't make ourselves accessible, like I said, we wouldn't be where we are today with it.
Great. Well, so I want to shift to the question of team. And you've mentioned to me a number of times in our conversations how essential having a great team around you and your co-founders has been. Share a story where you faced a really significant challenge with respect to team leadership or staffing or human resources, people within your companies. Share a story of a challenge with respect to teams and how you overcame it.
Oh, that is a really good question. team is so important. And I think when you look at why startups fail, there's, I would say that the top three reasons that startups fail is number one, you're not fulfilling a customer need. Number two is you run out of money. And number three is you don't have the right team around you. So team is such an important component of building a successful company. When we hire people, when we bring people on, I think the one thing we look for is making sure that they're wired in a way that they want to come in and make a difference. They want to come in and learn. And I think that is, and they have a positive attitude. And so I think that is way more important than what you see on a resume or a CV. If they fight for every last dollar, not that they shouldn't negotiate, but if it's only about the dollar or only about time off, you want something deeper there. You want someone to share in the passion and drive that you have. And so when we hire people, we feel that that's really important. And sometimes we don't get it right. And that's okay. But you have to
let's dig on that. And by the way, Kristi, remember, this will all be edited later. So if you want to tell me, look, I can't think of something right now, that's fine. But can you think of an example where you or the company made maybe a wrong hire? It just you thought it was going to be great and it wasn't. How did you deal with it?
Yeah. Okay. So we don't always get the hiring right. We have the right, we have the right, I feel like we have the right mindset and the right focus, but there are times where we don't get it right. Or you think you see something in someone that they have potential, and then you realize where their stopgap is, right? And we've had that. And we have hired people and working with them. And so there is one particular individual today who is, I'm going to say we brought him on fairly early on, wonderful at what he did and what he created. But we found that he was a bit of a bottleneck and just wanted to hold on and control and be the person that everything ran through. And so in an effort to try to, I'll say, uncap that and broaden that and bring more people in so that the flow could be better. And so more people could learn, more people could own it. There were two ways we could approach it. We could, because he was still great, like we still wanted to keep him. We could remove him and move him to another area, or we could really sort of work on ensuring the people around him and his ability to change, or I'm going to say evolve, and test that. And so we started down that road. And before we knew it, we're like, you know what, this just isn't working. And so what I proposed to him, and it seemed almost better to have a fresh start for him and really spending the time learning about who he was as a person, what made him tick, what he loved to do, like understanding all of those things. I found another role within the company for him and moved him there. And he is a rock star, a rock star. And so I think the lesson there is just because somebody's in a role today doesn't mean that's where they ultimately belong. It's really about paying attention to the individual at a deeper level of what makes them tick, what makes them happy, where do they shine? Because you want them to feel good about what they're doing and producing too. And then it's this wonderful chain event that it makes everything else around you better. So that's probably the best example I can give you.
Well, Kristi, we can all think of people and maybe ourselves at various times in our lives where we have not matched what's inside with what's outside. And at Abroad, of course, we're all about going within in order to have greater impact outside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a place that in our very instrumental society, we often miss that. We always look for criteria, action plans, objectives, roles and responsibilities, but none of those things are specifically about what's inside of us, eager to get out, eager to express itself. And when you can figure that out, that's actually one of the roles of a leader, is to figure out how to make that work. So
sure.
let's talk about let's find a moment in your professional, or it could be personal, but let's find a moment in your history as an entrepreneur where things were really going wrong, where something just was awry, or even perhaps a disaster impending. Something was going wrong. How did you navigate through that? What advice can you give to each of us to navigate through adversity?
Yeah. So something going wrong as an entrepreneur. I think there's probably a couple of, probably a couple of different things that I could share with you.
Pick the one that's most compelling to you.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, things go wrong all the time. And it's what you do in those situations that tend to matter most, like how you react to it. And so I think this is where, attitude and mindset matters. You could go into despair, or you could wallow in self-pity, or you could give up. I don't necessarily function that way. So when something goes wrong, you generally need to change something. That's what it means. I look at change as an opportunity. So first and foremost, it's an opportunity to learn something. I would, I guess I think about when we built Tastytrade. There's a good example of our original revenue model. And we thought, being in this niche business, we created this wonderful revenue model that was a cross between Costco and Groupon for the financial services industry. So a customer paid $1 and got $2 of product and service. And on the flip side, the companies that filled the virtual shelves, it was ultimately a referral business to them, right? And so what was critical for them to understand was the cost of acquisition of a customer and how valuable those customers were. And so while we understood it, while we lived it at the deepest level, we did not, we could not, we tried and we just failed at it, was articulating and teaching the call it the cost of acquisition of a valuable customer to all of these vendors that filled our virtual shelves. And so and even articulating the value prop to the customer, I think, was something that we did not do well. And we sort of had to come back to the table and rethink how we were going to make revenue out of what we were doing and what we were producing, because we loved what we did. Our customers really embraced the content, loved the content, and it was sort of this, I'll say sort of this pivotal moment where we're like, this is just not working, and we had to sort of unplug and figure out how we were going to make money, and we did. We pivoted, and we made our way through it. But I think what was important is for us to recognize the fact that part of this was on us. Part of this was what we weren't doing, what we thought was simple because of the world we lived in and functioned in. Doesn't mean it was simple to the rest of the world. It feels sort of like marketing 101 here, right? Like we didn't quite get the marketing right. But I think we also tended to make it a little bit more complex than it needed to be. So we got it wrong. We absolutely got it wrong. And we eventually got it right. But it took us a little while.
Well, Kristi, do you happen to recall roughly how long did it take you and your colleagues to figure out we got this wrong? And then about how long after that realization did it take you to get it right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good question. I think we also created opportunities around us that we had other alternatives and other options. We ended up going exclusive with one of our partners. That was in our store. And then we developed a wonderful brokerage firm from there. But that leap from shutting down the superstore to going exclusive, we had the superstore up and running, I want to say for about I'm going to say for about 6 months. And so it took 5 6 months to go, you know what? I'm not sure this is going to work. And at the same time, creating these other opportunities, we ended up sort of, I'll say, shifting within, I'm going to say within a 2 to 3 month period.
Kristi, you and your husband have been blessed with 3 daughters. I myself have 2 daughters, and so I know the feeling. It's really quite profound. What's one piece of advice you give to them as they build their careers?
Well, so I have 100 pieces of advice. First of all, as my first one went off to college, I created a book and I wrote 100 different pieces of advice that she could refer to. But, and I will do that with my next two as they go off to college.
So what you're saying is you've always been a pretty casual mom.
Super casual. The one, besides the confidence building, piece of advice that you constantly want to instill that confidence and that drive for them. The one thing that I continually drive home to each one of my girls is, as you go, out into this world on your own, just make sure that whatever choices you're making, that you're making it and you're loving what you're doing. Because my other life motto is do what you love what you do, because you spend a majority of your time doing it. And and if you're doing something you love, it doesn't feel like work. And so I'm sure you've heard that phrase said in a different way or whatever other places too, but that is truly a motto that I live by and I instill in my kids all the time. When I get asked a question, hey, what do you think about this this career or going down this path, and I go, does it make you happy? Like, do you feel like you're gonna love it? Like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And it's more about having them really truly shape an opinion about where they're going, and then they have to actually test it. It's like, test that out, see if you were right. And so it's about following your passion and making decisions for you, not necessarily for all the people around you. I go, I know I'm your mom, but you're not here in this world to please me. You are here to find the right path for you.
That's great. Sounds like a path we're all on, whether we know it or not. So now I'd like to ask one of my favorite questions. What is your favorite story from your experience, from your life? It doesn't have to have anything to do with business, career, leadership. It doesn't have to be relevant at all. And extra points for humor.
Okay. First of all, I'm not very funny, but this question is a lot of pressure. I guess what I'll do is I'll share a story that I feel like I've told 1,000 times before. And sadly enough, it comes down to a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. After my husband and I were married, we started talking about having kids, and it's a big responsibility being a parent. We said if we could keep the plants alive, we'll graduate to getting pets, and if we could keep the pets alive, then we'd have kids. Well, needless to say, our plants died, and we never got pets at that point, and we literally just jumped in with both feet to have kids. But it was at that point that I found this Calvin and Hobbes comic, and I cut it out, and I have it, swear to God, in my cabinet cupboard today still. But it was Kelvin standing in front of his parents sitting on the couch. And he says to them something like, what assurance do I have that you're not screwing me up? And my husband and I both laughed, like just really thought this was so funny. And it was when our girls were babies. But the reality is, as they grow older and develop, you realize that you really do have an impact on who they are and what they believe, and to some degree, even who they become. Again, to a degree. And you could, in fact, screw them up. And so now that's a lot of pressure on a parent, but it's also about sort of leadership too in business. But I still have that comic, like I said, in my cupboard, and it's just a good reminder to me that the impact we have on the people around us, especially closest to us. And so we should be mindful about what we do and what we share and what we say, and make sure that it's always sort of in the right vein.
Well, Kristi Ross, none of us are perfect parents, that's for sure. But I'm pretty confident that you are not screwing up your kids. I'm pretty confident you've created an extraordinary role model for them and lots of others. Opportunity is all around you. Dream big dreams, but do something about it. Purpose is a never-ending quest. It's an evolving story. In order to find it, even in order to seek it, we need to remove the fear. Sometimes that means forcing mindfulness. That means sitting down with one of those oversized yellow legal pads of paper. Please do it in pen and ink, not with your iPhone. It means taking the time and attention to think it through, what's best for you in the context of your friends and family and loved ones, your company, your country. But ultimately, if you're on the right path, you add far more value in the world. Kristi, I have two young daughters, Jolie and Sage, and I can only hope that they live a life as fulfilling and successful as yours. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me. Truly enjoyed talking with you, Rob.